I love you, little guy. Good evening, Houdat Nation, and a special good evening to our Bayou Blitz family. Listen, I want to let you guys know how powerful your show, the Bayou Blitz, is. Your show is so powerful that we have the ability to move Wednesdays into Thursdays. That's how powerful we are. And on that note, I would like to welcome you to a special Thursday night edition of the Bayou Blitz. I am Bob Rose. I'm one of your co-hosts for tonight's show. Joining me is my partner in crime and part of your powerhouse duo, Brendan Boylan. How are you tonight, Brendan?
Good. Powerhouse duo. You're really talking me up. I appreciate that a lot.
If we could afford it, Brendan, we should get media tag team championship belts like the wrestlers, and yeah, we could hang those in the background too.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. Hey, I know NXT's coming to Charlotte soon. I might have to check it out. I got some guys that I know that I did stuff with ESPN with that they're actually wrestling dark matches for AEW now.
Nice.
So I got to go check those out too, just because it's fun.
I follow Triple H and Shawn Michaels, DX, the DX duo on Twitter. I'm ashamed to say that they don't follow me back, but I mean, I could keep poking and prodding and see what we could do.
That would be fun. That would be fun. Hey, WWE, it's still real to me, dang it. I don't know if you ever seen that video, but you know, it's anyway, good times. But with that, I do want to talk about something a little bit more serious and something that's pretty near and dear to the both of us, Bob, and that's just mental health awareness. And there's a lot of things going on for a lot of people right now. December, a lot of times is stamped with the season of seasonal depression, even though it's supposed to be the happiest, jolliest time of year for everyone. Blame it on the weather, blame it on the pressure of the holidays. You can point at a ton of different things. And with some of the events that have happened over the last few days, the first being the dancing star and co-host of the Ellen DeGeneres show for the last few years that it was on, with Twitch passing away and taking his own life at 40 years old. Just a terrible, terrible thing to hear, especially with how happy and joyful he always was, whether it was on the show, whether it was on TikTok. You would have never known on the outside that he was struggling. The news that broke today with Tyrell Terry, a former 2020 NBA draft pick, suddenly retiring in the middle of the season, citing mental health issues and how the game he loves has become a mental health burden to him. So for his own sake, understanding that it was time to step away from the game. There's a lot of people going through a lot of stuff, guys. You know, myself included. I've shared this multiple times on multiple platforms. Like, I've been diagnosed with mild depression. It's just a part of it. It's something that I'll continue to battle throughout my life. But the most important thing that I want to stress to you guys, because you guys are friends, you guys are family, is that you're not in it alone. And there's always someone listening, or there's always an ear if you need someone to listen. I know I'm speaking for Bob as well. If there's anything we could ever do for you guys, whether it's the show related, whether it's just someone to talk to, someone to listen, our DMs are always open on Facebook and Twitter and what have you. But it's a really difficult time for everybody. And I encourage you, if you are struggling, to find someone you trust to talk to. It's not easy for everyone to find professional help. Unfortunately, it's not affordable for everybody to find professional help. But if you could just find the one person that you can trust in your life to do so and just sit down and listen, I really encourage you to do that, especially this time of year if you're struggling. I know that I have friends that probably hear me talk every day about something that's going on. And those friends mean the world to me. I hope you guys have those people in your life as well. And if not, please shoot a DM. You guys aren't alone in this. If you guys need resources, there's so many. You can Google so many. I will go ahead and give a shout out to my folks and their nonprofit, Navigate Hope. And if you just go to navhope.org, you can find a ton of different resources in your area. if you need that. But I just felt, Bob, it was really important to touch on some of these things, especially now that we've got a little bit of national news this week addressing it, because sometimes it takes a tragedy or national news for people to start talking about things like this.
Yeah, Brendan, and it shouldn't. Yeah, it shouldn't take a tragedy. Because every single human being walking the face of the earth has had some level of struggle in their life, be it current or past. Or if if you haven't, you should probably dig close to the people around you, because I can guarantee you that someone is going through something, in the shadows that you aren't aware of. And yeah, like I said, like you said, it shouldn't take a newsworthy tragedy to bring that to light, because, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't a weakness to talk to somebody because you need help, be it professional or otherwise. It isn't a weakness to feel depressed or to feel sad or to feel upset. The weak part is not seeking out the help that is available to you when you know it is available to you. And I promise you, no matter how alone you feel, there is somebody that cares enough about you to listen, or to try to help you through whatever you're going through. It might not come from the source that you expect, from the source. I promise you, listen, I'm one that will ever walk the planet. And out for a long, long time. Those of you that are those that are close, know that I struggle with addiction, especially this time of year. Know that I am an alcoholic that's been in recovery for a little over 15 years. And if you know anything about addiction or alcoholism, some of the depressions, and both mental, emotional, and physical health problems that causes. And for so much of my life leading up to that point, I pushed off. I knew I needed help. I knew there were problems with me. I didn't know what, but I knew issues. And as a result, I chased away a lot of people close to me. The ones that were, and I don't mean to sound critical for the ones that I chased away. You did what you had to do, and it was my fault that I chased you away. But the ones brave and strong enough to stick around, my God, you people are saints. You are walking angels, because I have nothing but the utmost gratitude, and love for you. So I will echo what Brendan has said. If you are sitting here watching our show or listening to our show, and you feel like you need help, we are at least ears to listen. I'm not going to pretend a professional advice giver. Maybe I've gone through what you're going through. Maybe Brendan's gone through what you're going through. But if you need to reach out just for an ear to listen or for a little bit of advice, I promise you neither Brendan or I will turn you away. We won't have the answers, but we will help you find the answers. And bless all of you for having gone through whatever struggles you've gone through in your life to this point. I promise you, no matter how low that you think you feel right now, it can and will get better, if you're willing to fight for it.
Yeah, that was like I said, I think that was something that both of us have some strong attachments to. And I just felt it was really important to open up the show that way and talk about depression, talk about anxiety, talk about seasons. And it's a tough season for everybody. I know, like I said, I got some stuff going on right now. I'm sure Bob does. I'm sure some of you guys listening do, as well. So again, there are resources out there. And if you ever need someone just to vent to, that my DMs are open, Bob's are open. You guys are not alone. Like my hat says, you're not broken. We're all here together, and we're all in it together. And the least we can do as human beings is look out for each other and love each other. So on that note, Bayou Blitz family, we love all of you. If you guys need anything at all, we're here for you. And I hope you guys have some people in your lives you guys can lean on if you're going through some stuff, especially in these winter seasons. So thanks for taking some time to listen to us talk about that.
Yeah.
I hope that encouraged at least one person watching or listening this evening. But let's talk about some Saints football. Let's be honest, Bob. Let's just be blunt and honest like we were for the first 10 minutes of the show when it comes to the New Orleans Saints as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Speaking of depression,
uh, the Saints, they're not making the playoffs. I think there's a I actually said it in an article. I wrote it in an article last week. You know, Lloyd and Dumb and Dumber said, "So you're telling me there's a chance?" Yeah, there's a slim chance.
there's
1%.
one chance, and yeah, and I wrote about it too in one of my articles. Yeah, and it's simply this. Obviously, the Saints need to win the remaining 4 games, ladies and gentlemen. If they lose this Sunday, they are done officially. If they win those 4 games, they also need Bay to lose at least 3 of their remaining 4 games. They need the Carolina Panthers to lose at least 2 of their remaining 4 games. If that happens, no matter what happens with Atlanta, as long as the Saints beat them, beating the Falcons this Sunday is part of that remaining 4 games. The Saints can finish tied with Atlanta as long as it's only tied with Atlanta, and they will take that tiebreaker based off of the season of a season sweep. They need Carolina and Tampa Bay to have 10 losses at least, because Tampa Bay would have the New Orleans tiebreaker because of their season sweep over the Saints. And even if the Saints beat the Carolina Panthers in the season finale, Carolina doesn't lose another game, Carolina would hold the tiebreaker over New Orleans because of a better divisional record. So that's why, folks, the Saints need to win their remaining 4 games. Tampa needs to lose at least 3 games. Carolina needs to lose 2 games. That's your one and only scenario.
What a great breakdown by Bob. Made it as easy and simple for you guys to understand as possible. But
See, it helps that I'm an insomniac because I actually sat up Saturday night before Tampa Bay lost to San Francisco. And I actually mathematically figured all this out. I didn't need any of the networks to tell me because all the networks have the Saints out of the picture. I decided to sit down and figure out, and it's very simple if you look at the divisional standings, and who the Saints have lost to. But yeah, my insomnia helped figure out this scenario. So kudos to that.
Kudos to insomnia. One and only time. Now, what I was getting at is, despite the Saints' playoff hopes being bleaker than bleak at this point.
Biblical miracle, we'll call it that.
Christmas miracle. Come on, Bob. 'Tis the
Fair.
season.
That's
Christmas
fair.
miracle. The last 4 games are still valuable to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not in the sense of making the playoffs, maybe not in the sense of its direct impact on this season, but I think a lot of impact towards next season and beyond. On Under the Dome on Tuesday, when I was filling in for you with Alan, we talked about, the potential of Sean Payton coming back to coach, whether it's in New Orleans or whether it's elsewhere. I don't think he's coming back to New Orleans.
No,
that's a whole discussion for another time.
Yeah.
I do think that some of those articles came out, or the Jeff Duncan piece came out, because maybe Sean and Mickey have had some communication about, let's try to drive my price up. Let me help you. And just, doing the nice little gentleman's agreement there. Mm-hmm. With that said, Dennis is on the hot seat. New Orleans doesn't currently have a quarterback of the future. They do not have a first-round draft pick. And if you guys saw the show on Tuesday, I'm sorry I'm repeating myself here, but I know that Mickey Loomis has continued to find ways to manipulate and maneuver the cap. But at some point, whether we want to believe it or not, it's going to catch up to you. And I think it's finally got to that point because the Saints are no longer competitive Woo!
Bless you.
Needed that. Thanks. No longer competitive in terms of a playoff seeding or a playoff spot or a Super Bowl contender. If there's a season to eat the cap, make some drastic decisions for the team moving forward, it's going to be this offseason. But let's say the Saints win the last 4, still miss the playoffs, but win the last 4. Our perception of this team, the media's perception of this team, is going to change a little bit. There's still going to be gaping holes that they need to fill. But there's a lot that we can learn about next year's Saints in these last 4 games.
Yes and no, Brendan. I mean, I do agree with that assessment. But I also believe that winning the last 4 or 3 of the last 4, finishing the season very strongly, might also be the worst possible outcome for this team. With the exception of if you squeak into the playoffs and make an unlikely run, that changes everything, obviously. And all you need to do is get into the dance and you have a chance. But outside of that, in your scenario, they finish strong, they win their last 4 or 3 of their last 4, but just miss the playoffs. And I think that's a very plausible, scenario. I believe that a finish like that will probably cause Dennis Allen to keep his job. And I am now, and as you know, or as you know, if you've watched this show, I have supported Dennis Allen. I didn't agree with his job. I didn't think he was doing a good job, but I supported bringing Dennis Allen back for another chance through most of this season. Now I don't. And I don't because I think it's very clear to me and should be very clear to management that Dennis Allen is a very good defensive coach, a very good assistant coach. What seems to be a very good person. None of those things necessarily make you a very good head coach, which I think Dennis Allen is not. I think this team needs, and I'm willing to entertain the idea of Sean Payton coming back. I'm with you. I don't think it happens. We'll chalk it up to another. That'd be a post-Christmas miracle, but a miracle nonetheless. And I agree with you as far as that's another conversation for another time. But this team does need a vast improvement in position, a major improvement at the offensive coordinator position. And I think a strong finish might convince management to go into the 2023 season with at least Dennis Allen back. I still think they move on from Pete Carmichael. But if you have an infection through your entire hand and you only had, this is so morbid and I apologize, an infection through your entire hand that should cause your hand to be removed, but you only remove 2 fingers, how is that a help? It isn't. I think that that is one area that this team needs a major change and a major shakeup. They need a major change and a major shakeup at a number of positions on the roster. A strong finish still doesn't change the fact that you have no. A strong finish still doesn't change the fact that you need an upgrade at the very minimum of the number 2 running back position, the defensive tackle position, and the safety position. And I'm not worried about no first-round pick because you can maneuver different things. If you finish poorly, you still have a high second-round pick. Therefore, you have the ammunition to get into the middle of the round to get yourself a franchise signal caller. Or you can maneuver salary cap, as you so aptly pointed out, that Mickey Loomis is an expert at doing so. You can maneuver the salary cap to bring in a Garoppolo, to bring in a Derek Carr, if you think either one of those guys might be the answer. And again, that's another conversation for another time. We're talking ifs here. So, yes, this team could answer a lot of questions with a strong finish. They still have a lot to play for individually. And by that, I mean that there are specific positions that could really answer a lot of questions going into 2023 with a strong finish. But unless the Saints are going to squeak into the playoffs and go on a major historic run, then I don't think a strong finish in the win-loss column necessarily helps this team, for the future seasons.
One of those positions that could have some answers questions answered rather than answers questioned. Oof. What was I saying? But listen, Benjamin, I think, is a really interesting pickup.
Yeah.
Off waivers. They put a waiver claim in for him the first time. Obviously, Saints fans, you know who Benjamin is because he had a great day against the Saints way back in week 9 in Arizona. And for a couple weeks there, fantasy owners, you probably enjoyed Benjamin as well. And then mysteriously got cut, which I thought was really odd, and then gets waived quickly after by Houston, and Pierce is like doubtful this week.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of weird things going on, and that always goes to the point is people go, "Oh, go sign this guy," and my response is always, "Well, there's a reason he's available."
Right.
But Eno's going to get a shot to potentially solidify himself as the Saints' number 2 back, not just for this season, but potentially the years going forward. If there's going to be a running mate to Alvin Kamara, this is an opportunity for Benjamin to shine, and I think he's got a really interesting story. I think he's a pretty good runner, and I think he has a spot in the NFL. So that's one of those spots that's going to potentially have some answers.
Absolutely.
But to your point, Bob, there's when Dennis Allen was hired as a head coach and Pete Carmichael was retained, one thing that I said was, and now you're essentially biting your tongue, but I said way back then, well, that's good because the Saints culture has been so good over the years. Try to keep as much of it intact as possible. And now, especially after what happened with Tampa Bay, and we addressed it a little bit last week, and I said it on our halftime show a couple weeks ago as well, is I need to see if the Saints had that dog, if they had that fight in them. And a lot of that goes back to the coaching staff, and I just didn't see that from New Orleans for yet another week. So I am now at the point where maybe it's just time to hear a new voice.
Yeah.
There were some rumors today about Mike Tomlin being out of Pittsburgh, up where you are. And
he won't be. He won't be. I will tell you that, but I get it.
And my first thought was, man, he's been there for so long. Maybe it's just time for a new voice. And then it dawned on me. Even though Sean's gone and Dennis is a new voice, how much of a new voice is it? How much of a new voice is Pete Carmichael? Because he's been there for so long. Mm-hmm. Maybe it is time, instead of holding on to the past, if you will, to make that complete jump and step forward. I agree with you. I do think Dennis Allen is a better assistant or coordinator. And that's the case for some guys. Is that a knock on Dennis as a person or his ability to coach a defense? No, it just means that he's a better coordinator than he is a head coach. Mm-hmm. And off the top of my head, I can't think of a comparison, but I know
Phillips. Wade Phillips is the first one that comes to my mind, but there are others.
I was actually gonna go with Bum Phillips, but
Bum had some success as a head coach.
It's a little bit of a stretch.
Yep. Josh McDaniels. It's been a one. Now he's had Brady, but still, Josh McDaniels has been a wonderful offensive coordinator. Yeah. But McDaniels has been a lousy head coach. Leslie Frazier. We're looking at a possible example in Tampa Bay, as we speak, with their coach. Why can't I remember it? Todd Bowles. Bowles has been a great defensive coordinator for several teams. But this is his second stint as a head coach, and he is not doing so hot. In my opinion, people will counter and saying, he won a Super Bowl. Gary Kubiak was a terrific offensive coordinator, but in my opinion, a lousy head coach. Now, people again will counter, he won a Super Bowl with Denver. They won in spite of him, not because of him. He had some playoff teams in Houston. With the Houston Texans when he was there, but I don't believe he ever won a playoff game with them. So he had a better record as a head coach than some of the other names that we've mentioned. But still not a great deal of success. But they're just off the top of my head. And again, doesn't mean any of the Dick LeBeau is in the Hall of Fame or will be in the Hall of Fame. mostly as a defensive coordinator and a wonderful defensive back in the day. He's had 2 opportunities as a head coach and colossal failures each time. All of those guys are great football minds, but I don't think anybody, even with the Kubiak arguments that I just threw out there, I don't think anybody will stand up there and say, "Oh yeah, I'd take them to head coach my franchise." Doesn't mean they're a bad person. Doesn't mean they're a bad coach. Does mean that they're a poor fit as a head coach. It's just like if I had a Ferrari for 10 years and it was in perfect working condition, and my kids, Will, Will, Isabella, Brianna, all rode with me every time I drove that Ferrari. And again, in perfect working order. And I decided one day I'm not going to drive that Ferrari anymore. Does that mean that the 5-year-old Will is going to be able to get behind the wheel and drive it just as successfully just because he's been in the car every time I've driven it? Nope. I'm in an imagery kind of mood tonight, guys, as you can tell.
That's actually a really good comparison. Two quick ones in the chat. John says Steve Spagnuolo. That's a really good one. I don't know how that slipped my brain. Jimmy Gumbo.
Spagnuolo was awful in New Orleans. That's why it slipped your brain. It was PTSD.
And then Mike Martz with the Rams. So, I mean, those are 2 good ones. Spagnuolo, I can't believe slipped my mind, but you're absolutely right. It's because he was terrible when he was in New Orleans. But, man, that was some of the first years that I was covering Saints football.
Yes,
I guess I try to forget that. Now, like I said, I'm in the seat where it's time to hear some new voices. Unfortunately for Saints fans, while some questions can be answered over the last 4 weeks, there's more questions in 2023 surrounding some really important things, or even in the off season. And that's, like a Mike Thomas contract, Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, plus whatever other quarterback you want to throw in there. Would it surprise you at one bit, a little bit off topic, would it surprise you one bit if Taysom Hill's the starting quarterback for the Saints next year? Because it wouldn't for me.
No, it would. Do I expect it? No. Do I think it's a good idea? No. But at this point, no, it wouldn't surprise me. It would anger me though, because if they have even an inkling that Taysom Hill it might be their starter in 2023, then he should be the damn starting quarterback right now. To at least give you that idea, to give him a little bit more of an audition than we saw, last year. And he had a lengthy audition last year. But he now has a Chris Olave and a more seasoned more improved Juwan Johnson, etc. So if you have an inkling that Taysom Hill might even be in the conversation as a quarterback in 2023, then he should be taking the damn snaps now. No, he is not the answer, ladies and gentlemen. That's just my opinion, given the scenario that Brendan gave me. And I do still think that they'll go out and get one in the draft. I do still think that they'll bring another guy, a bridge starter, in his free agency. I'm not going to speculate who at this point because it's a lengthy list of potential free agents. Therefore, I don't think either Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton will be on this team in 2023. But if you think Taysom Hill is a possibility, then put him behind center right now.
No, Jameis is not starting this week. It's Andy Dalton again. And to echo Bob's point, if they have an inkling that Jameis Winston is the guy who should be starting, but they've made it pretty clear that that he's not. Be Kind has a good comment here. It's Bob, you had teased last show about your thoughts with Alvin Kamara going into next season. If we're going ahead and previewing some of the off-season moves here, because it's it's kind of that point of the year before we jump into the Falcons preview. This is the last question I want to ask before we jump into the Falcons preview and Falcons week. You teased us last week. What's your thoughts with Alvin Kamara potentially not being a Saint next year?
I think it's a pretty good chance, folks. And you said Be Kind to ask that question.
Yep.
Be Kind. Way to stay on top of past shows, and bring that back up. There's a lot of players that are going to be very difficult. I realize a portion of the Saints fan base is saying fire everybody. That's not realistic, folks. Michael Thomas is one player, who's on the fans' chopping block. Mike's contract just makes it next to impossible to get rid of him because there's so many restructures and just the way the contract is set up. But if you're looking at a big name whose contract would be fairly easy to dump off on another, look no further than one. I'm not saying they should trade him. I'm not saying they will trade him. I am just saying I would not be surprised if they do, and I fully expect them to field some offers because Alvin, at least on paper, is still in his prime. He's 28 years old. Even though he has had, in my opinion, an awful year by his standards, through a variety, through 3 or 4 different reasons why. He is still an attractive player to most other systems in the NFL. He's good enough between the tackles. He's an excellent. He has elite vision as a runner. He has elite receiving skills out of the backfield or split out wide. Therefore, he's an attractive option to any franchise. If you're in the Saints' shoes, you're looking at salary cap problems. Mickey Loomis and Kai Hartley is an expert at navigating that. But at some point, you're going to lose players, be it not being able to retain them, re-sign them, or just having to move on from them. We haven't seen a lot of that, but it's inevitable. And you're looking at the Saints' shoes. In the Saints' shoes, Alvin Kamara is going to be suspended next year, probably for at least 6 games. They avoided that this year. In hindsight, you wish it would have happened, because you weren't going to go to the playoffs anyway. You're going to have to address the running back position anyway, even if Kamara is on the roster, because right now you have no options behind him. Why not move on from that deal? Get some of those draft picks back. A player of Kamara's value will probably bring you in, maybe not a first-round pick, but probably a second and a third, or a couple of day 2 picks that you could then transition and give yourself some ammunition to move up and get that all elusive franchise signal caller. You get rid of the bulk of, if not most of, his salary. They haven't had to restructure him nearly as many times as they've had to restructure Cam, Onyemata, Thomas, even Ramczyk to some extent. That's what makes their deals so much more difficult to get out of than what Alvin Kamara's. So, and there'll be plenty of time to talk about this in the offseason. It's for those reasons. And you don't know, a potential new coach coming in or a potential new offensive coordinator coming in. You don't know how they're going to want to use a player like Kamara. So why not give them a whole clean slate at running back to work with? And give yourself a couple additional picks to pick up some more young legs to bolster that position. I love Alvin Kamara. I would love to see him finish his career in New Orleans, but he's had a poor season while at the same time keeping a high value throughout the league. That's why I would not be surprised if they move him this offseason.
Definitely a hot topic for the offseason, Bob. But let's move to Saints Falcons. Regardless of what the records are, this is always a heated rivalry. It's always a tough game. Now, if the Saints win, I believe they take over the regular season all-time series for the first time in a long time, maybe ever. Ever. There you go.
Ever. Yeah.
Historian Bob. Now, it feels like a lifetime ago, but these two teams met in week 1, and it was a completely different looking Saints team. Jarvis Landry looked like a Pro Bowler in the 4th quarter. Michael Thomas had returned in a very big way. And Jameis Winston was the Heisman Trophy winner from Florida State, at least in the 4th quarter. and gave an all-time great interview after
Yeah.
the game because there was pain everywhere. And for Saints fans now, you can relate to Jameis in a much different way here in Week 15. There's pain everywhere. And that was a different Falcons team, too. I mean, we have to note the Falcons are going to be trotting out a rookie quarterback in Desmond Ridder this week, who I thought was probably the most intriguing quarterback prospect in the draft after Malik Willis for me. We'll see what the Falcons do. I mean, at this point, they don't have a whole lot to be playing for either. They have an outside chance at the playoff. Kyle Pitts has been shut down for the season. Cordero Patterson has dealt with injuries throughout the year. And the defense traded away their best player this season as well. So heading into this week, you have two teams with not a whole lot to play for, but they got bragging rights on the line. And for the Saints to be playing the Falcons at home, this could be a morale boost, not just for the fans, but the guys in that locker room as well, if they come out and have a good and strong performance. Bob, I'm going to ask you about the defense first, because if you look historically for New Orleans against rookie quarterbacks, not good. Against rookie quarterbacks in the Superdome, I don't need to bring up RG3, do I? That was a nightmarish type of memory.
Yeah.
But how do the Saints, who have been beaten up all over the field and defensively as well, how do the Saints control the game with what's been their strongest unit this season, the defense?
The first thing New Orleans has to do is shut down the run. And yeah, that might be easier said than done, because Atlanta is third in the league in rushing attempts, fourth in the league in rushing yardage. And if you recall, folks, this is an Atlanta offense that pushed the New Orleans Saints all over the field for 3.5 quarters in week 1. We thought that was an anomaly at the time. It turned out that was just a precursor to what has been a disappointing New Orleans run defense all year. Now, they've come on in the last 3 weeks pretty strong. But before that, this didn't even look like a shadow of the run defense that we saw from 2018 to 2021. For New Orleans, and check out I do have a preview on this aspect of the game coming out, tomorrow morning on the Saints News Network. But for New Orleans to control Desmond Ridder, who is not only making his first NFL start, he's taking his first NFL snaps during the regular season. And you're right, the track record of Dennis Allen defense and New Orleans defenses, at least during the Sean Payton era, it's been abysmal. But the Falcons tried to support veteran quarterback Marcus Mariota with their running game all year long. So don't expect that that's going to change just because they have a better thrower in Ridder coming in. And yeah, I said that Ridder is a better thrower than Marcus Mariota. We're still going to see Atlanta try to set a tone with what has been an offensive line for Atlanta that's still awful in pass protection, but they've been pretty physical run blockers. And that's shown because Cordero Patterson, and then once he got hurt and nicked up at midseason, rookie Tyler Algier, they both had very good seasons. And you want to talk about an inside-outside punch between Tyler and Cordero, that's what they're going to hit New Orleans with. So New Orleans needs to stop the run, and they need to stop it from the opening snap of the football game to make Atlanta feel like they have to put this game on the shoulders of not only Desmond Ridder, but an Atlanta a receiving core that's without Kyle Pitts and really without any legitimate weapons outside of Drake London, who I do think is a good receiver, through the intermediate routes, a physical guy. But they don't have a deep receiving core that's going to scare a lot of defenses. Their best weapons are in the backfield with Patterson and Algier. So if New Orleans, the first thing they need to do, the main thing they need to concentrate on is stopping the run and creating disruption in that Atlanta backfield that's going to spill over, and put increased pressure on Desmond Ridder.
I'm glad you said that about Drake London. If you go back to week 1, when he was guarded by Marshawn Lattimore only gave up 1 reception, but London had a pretty good game
Mhm.
overall in his NFL debut. Sticking with the Saints defense, we talked about some of their struggles against rookie quarterbacks over the last 15, 16 years, but it's never easy for a rookie quarterback to be taking his first NFL snaps against a Superdome crowd. And some defensive leaders like Demario Davis and Cameron Jordan. Cam's close to the sacks record. Will he get it with a rookie quarterback? And how can the New Orleans Saints defensive pass rush make life awful for Ritter in his first start?
The defensive ends are going to have to come to play. And especially Cam Jordan against Atlanta, that's usually never a problem. But we didn't see a whole lot of pressure on Marcus Mariota in week 1. The reason being that Atlanta moved him outside the pocket a lot. Design rollouts, RPOs, things like that. So for that to work, the first thing that the New Orleans secondary has to do is keep Atlanta receivers from getting any quick separation whatsoever. Make Ritter hold on to the football and go through his progressions. Because if that happens, on paper, the Saints pass rush still holds a major advantage over the Atlanta pass protection. So, Ritter, he's not as athletic as Marcus Mariota, but Ritter can still move. Make him feel like he has to force the football rather than just take an easy completion. Make him feel like that pass rush is breathing down his neck all the time, because he's already going to feel rushed with all his decisions. That's just natural for a rookie quarterback. Increase that clock in his head, make it go faster, or make him feel like things are going to go faster. And for the Saints, for that to happen, the secondary has to prevent any quick releases, any quick, easy passes for Ritter. Make him eat the football, go through his progressions. And I think the defensive ends for New Orleans, especially Cam, who's been playing pretty well all year, they should be able to get the Ritter and create some havoc.
Remember, no more Cameron Jordan and Matt Ryan relationship, but to your point, Bob, Cam Jordan has always found success against Atlanta. I would not be surprised to see him find some more success in their second matchup of the season. Flipping it over to the offense. I mean, let's be honest, Bob. The Saints' offense has been putrid at times this season. They're going to be introducing a new running back to the system with Benjamin this week. So I don't expect him to get a whole lot of touches, which is going to put more pressure on Alvin Kamara, who I'm calling, just a little tease for my article that's coming out this week too, is I'm calling him the #1 fantasy football risk for the first week of the playoffs. Listen, Kamara's only scored 3 touchdowns this year, Bob. It all came in one game. He's had games where you take the rushing yards and the receiving yards, you combine them, it looks okay. But you kind of alluded to it earlier. He hasn't had a good year to his standards. And his standards are very high. 5-time Pro Bowler, Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2017. I mean, to a lot of other teams, they gladly take the production that Kamara's had this year in an offense. But the Saints' offense hasn't been good. Outside of Chris Olave, there's still a lot of question marks at receiver. Andy Dalton hasn't played awful. I said his game against Tampa Bay wasn't bad. It was a pretty solid outing for Andy Dalton, but you know what you're getting out of Andy Dalton. You're not really sure what you're getting past Chris Olave in terms of wideouts. And in terms of the backfield, especially with Ingram going on IR, which will probably rule him out for the remainder of the season. Where are you looking towards offensively, and where can the Saints find some advantages against this Atlanta Falcons team? Because right now it's really just Olave and Kamara that are your weapons, right?
If Juwan Johnson, who missed 2 weeks ago against Tampa Bay, and he's still limited in practice with an ankle injury. If Juwan Johnson is 100%, I think Jawan has to be listed as one of the more pleasant surprises for the Saints in 2022,
Absolutely.
which is interesting because Atlanta has had all kinds of problems defending tight ends this year. And that to me tells me that a 100% Jawan Johnson could have himself a nice afternoon. Secondly, if you have Alvin Kamara on your fantasy team and you're in the playoffs, folks, play him.
You
And
have
I'll
to
tell you
start.
what. Well, you do have him, but play him and expect big things. And I'll tell you why. My fantasy football team, where I used the 6th overall pick on Kamara, my fantasy football team missed the playoffs by 1.5 points, which means I'm not in the play. Yeah, which means I'm not in the playoffs. So it's only natural that Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, two of the Saints that I have, are going to have monstrous afternoons because it means absolutely nothing to me. Yeah, mentioned that the Saints defense got pushed around for like 3.5 quarters, in week one. The Saints offensive line, the same thing happened to them. They couldn't really run the ball with Kamara, who, by the way, got only 12 touches for 46 yards in that game. Again, kind of a precursor for what was to come of the season. Poor usage, poor effort, and poor production, from Alvin Kamara. And we've seen a lot of all three of those things all year long. So one thing I've noticed about Kamara is if he's going to have a good game, it's because he gets involved as a receiver early on. If he doesn't get involved as a receiver, and I'm talking in the very first drive, if he doesn't get involved as a receiver, he seems to lose interest. And I might be way off base. I don't know what's going on in his head. I'm not in those conversations in the huddle or on the sidelines. I'm just looking through my own eyes as an analyst, either watching on TV or in a few occasions at the game. And I just see a disinterested player. So if keeping his interest means that you have to feed him the ball 2 or 3 times on that first drive, he's still your best player. So do it. Chris Olave, he had 3 catches against the Falcons, but like you pointed out, Brendan, Jarvis Landry had himself a wonderful ball game, as did Michael Thomas. Landry, the ghost of Christmas past, have stolen Jarvis Landry. Michael Thomas is broken again, as we know. So Chris Olave is your only weapon at wide receiver. I think Rashid Shaheed has had a magnificent second half of the year, and it wouldn't surprise me if he had a decent game. But as far as who you can count in on down in and down out in every situation, Chris Olave is your guy at that position. And he has an interesting matchup with AJ Terrell, who is without a doubt the best defensive back that the Falcons have. Terrell, Atlanta fans will have you believe that he's a Pro Bowler. He's not, but he's a good player. Good enough to probably keep Olave in check. And if that happens, and this is a refrain that Brandon and I have thrown out to you guys every single week, if somebody keeps Olave in check, the problem has become nobody else has been good enough on that Saints receiving core to step forward. Even if the New Orleans offensive line does their job against an awful Atlanta pass rush outside of Grady Jarrett, if Andy Dalton has nobody to get the ball to, then Andy ends up eating it and either making poor throws or taking coverage sacks. So the matchups to watch are going to be those New Orleans those New Orleans pass targets. If Kamara can get on track, if Olave can win his matchups against AJ Terrell, if Atlanta's defense can contain tight end Jawan Johnson, and if Shaheed or anybody else in that receiving core can step up, those are the matchups to watch because the Saints' pass protection has been better in recent weeks. They've broken down a little bit in the fourth quarter against San Francisco and Tampa Bay. Caused Dalton to make some baffling decisions under pressure. That tainted an otherwise solid football game. But the last thing you guys need to know about the New Orleans offense, they've scored 1 touchdown in the last 9 quarters. That is something to be very, very concerned about, even against what is a poor Atlanta defense.
Gumbo asked a good question. How many carries do you expect for Taysom? I'm expecting not enough. I've talked about this multiple times, Bob. When Taysom Hill has at least 9 touches of the carries and receptions combined, when he has at least 9 scrimmage touches, the Saints are undefeated.
Yep.
Is that an anomaly? Maybe. Is it a coincidence? I don't think so. I think he's very much one of those guys, kind of like Ingram had been at certain points in his Saints career, was he got better as the game continued. And he's just kind of a wear you down type of runner. And especially with Ingram sidelined now and Eno Benjamin only being with the team for a couple days, he might not even be active.
Right.
Taysom Hill's going to be he's going to be your number 2 running back, essentially. You got to give him some touches. You got to feed him. And he's got a good track record against Atlanta as well in his career. Look up some of his outings against Atlanta. So personally, I really like Kamara's matchup with these linebackers in Atlanta, especially now that Jones is gone. And I know Jones didn't play that opening matchup, but I do like the matchup that Kamara has as a receiver. But the problem all year has been Kamara hasn't been utilized well as a receiver. So can the Saints utilize him well in a very favorable matchup? I think for New Orleans, this is going to be the one. This is the one game I see on the remainder of the schedule, Bob, where I'm like, if the offense has anything in them, this is the game you show it. This is the weakest defense you're going to face. You have favorable matchups for some of your better players. You highlighted Juwan Johnson. I'll throw Adam Troutman in that conversation as well. He's had an okay year. Troutman has, and he's kind of found his role as a number 2 receiving threat. But whatever. People didn't like the pick then. They still don't like the pick now. I think there was a thought process of what he was going to be, and fans expected him to be what he was at Dayton and catch a gazillion passes a year and be the next coming of Jimmy Graham. But we've been hoping for that since
Jimmy Graham.
Yeah, I was going to say, 10 years now? But nonetheless, I there's so many matchups that are in the Saints' favor.
Yeah.
You have to show something. And Dalton's going to be the starter the rest of the year. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. I don't want questions the rest of the year, whether it's on the podcast, on my Twitter, or on my articles. I think Jameis should be playing. I've made that known. We both have. But the situation is he's not. Dalton's going to start the rest of the year barring an injury. And so, Dalton, Andy, you still got to audition for another job next year, man. Put the numbers up this week.
Yeah. And Brendan, the reality is, and I've said this to many people too, outside of the Arizona game, the Saints haven't lost because of Andy Dalton.
Right.
He hasn't been spectacular. But he hasn't been the second coming of Ryan Leaf or the Billy Joe horrors of the Mike Ditka era or anything like that. Andy Dalton has been a serviceable quarterback. So let's face reality. And I agree with you. I do think that Jameis has gotten screwed over this year by the New Orleans and by Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael. And he deserved better. But nonetheless, the way the Saints have lost these games, I don't think that their record would have been much different than what it is with Jameis Winston in every game at quarterback. I could be wrong. And if any of y'all have a time machine, and can take us back and change, I would happily admit that I was wrong if that is the case. But the reality is this: Dennis Allen has decided a long, long time ago that Jameis Winston was not his quarterback, and that's the reality of the situation. Andy Dalton is going to, barring injury, Andy Dalton is going to start the rest of the way, and that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, I think that's just like you said, it's the way it's going to be. Unfortunately, I was hoping New Orleans would use these last 4 weeks, and if they lose this week against Atlanta, they use those last 3 weeks as an audition tape for other players. But I don't see that being the case, whether it's at quarterback, running back, receiver, anywhere. Really, I would like to see Trevor Penning get an audition and actually see him start at left tackle at this point of the year. Yeah,
same. I pointed that out. A couple things that I'd love to see. What do you have to lose by plugging in Trevor Penning at left tackle? What do you have to lose by? Right. What do you have to lose by giving Rashid Shaheed more targets? You know what you have and trash Quan Smith. You know what you have in Marquez Callaway, and the fact is that it hasn't been good enough. You don't know what you have in Rashid Shaheed, so find out. We've already seen Alontae Taylor. We've already seen players like we've already seen Caden Ellis, so you know what you have there. Once Peyton Turner gets if Peyton Turner gets healthy, I would start him and play him a whole bunch of reps. Keep him in every situation. Again, you got to find out. Marcus Davenport is about to be a free agent. Cam Jordan could be, and again, this is an early offseason conversation. Cam Jordan could be on your short list of salary cap casualties. So find out what you have in Peyton Turner. Find out what you have in Trevor Penning, like you said, because you know James Hurst is a capable guard. If you can or decide to move on from Andrus Peat, then you know that you have Hurst as an interior option, because you don't have to play him a tackle, because you got your tackle in Trevor Penning. It's situations like find out what you have in Jameis Winston. Find out what you have in Eno Benjamin. I think it was John Butler that just made this comment. That's what a good head coach would do.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not in a tanking spot by any means, but you're not out of the playoffs, or you're out of the playoffs, but you're not in a tanking situation because you don't have a first-round pick. So there is not a better situation in the world to play young guys. Because, again, you're not going to get accused of tanking by your fan base or by anybody else because you don't have a pick to tank for.
Mm-hmm.
And you're resting up some of these veterans that are getting older, whether you're keeping them next year or not, and you get to see what you have. We'll see what happens. I mean, the Atlanta game is going to be really interesting. We're going to have so much more to talk about in the pregame on Sunday. But before we give, where people can follow us and some of our final thoughts here, Bob, I do want to ask you if you have one or two of your favorite memories of this rivalry. What are they?
My most awful memory is undoubtedly the playoff loss that this team suffered in New Orleans after the 1991 season. And that Atlanta team was actually fun to watch. With Deion Sanders and the Jerry Glanville, Andre Rison, the Too Legit to Quit bunch. But that, in my opinion, was the best team of the Jim Mora era. Quinn Early had really come of age as a receiver. You started to see that offense with Bobby Hebert open it up just a little bit, not enough, but just a little bit. And there was undoubtedly 1991 and 92. Was the prime years for all four of those Dome Patrol linebackers. The secondary started to play up to snuff with what the front seven gave. So that loss in the 91 playoffs, and you knew it was going to be a close game, and it was entertaining. But that long touchdown pass to Michael Haynes is just a dagger in the hearts of older Saints fans to this day. On the positive side, I know people are going to bring up the return to the Dome, and I understand why. I was watching the game on TV. And it was, even watching it on TV was a very emotional experience. But to me, a memory that stands out just as much was Drew breaking Marino's all-time passing yardage record against the Falcons on Monday night. That Dome seemed like, and again, I was watching on TV, that Dome just seemed energized. That was the part of the 2011, memorable 2011 season that we reminisced about a little bit last week. I would, if there was one game that I could pick to go back and watch in any New Orleans Saints history other than the Super Bowl, I think it would have been the return to the Dome for obvious reasons. But again, that Drew breaking Marino's long-standing passing yardage record for a single season against the Atlanta Falcons of all teams. And I just when Sean Payton got here, when Drew Brees got here, they were outsiders. I mean, neither one grew up in New Orleans. Neither one grew up as a New Orleans Saints fan, but they both jumped 2 feet first into the Falcons Saints rivalry. And they both said the first thing we have to do is own the Atlanta Falcons. And for 16 years, that's what they did. So yeah, my memories of the rivalry are more kind of long standing, dominance because of that.
Bob, you brought up two great moments in Saints history with the return of the Dome in 2011. For people that remember, I had a really cool piece of memorabilia from the 2011 season, but I was on the road. I was back on my road tour, so I get to show it off now because Bob very conveniently brought it back to the 2011 season. There is, let's see if the light can get there. Drew Brees' game issued jersey from the 2011 season. Drew did me a good one on that one, signed it, wrote all that stuff on it. And then this is a rare one. This is probably one of my favorite pieces. Is how many times have you seen a Steve Gleason autographed jersey?
Never. I have never.
That was signed. It's you could definitely tell the disease had started doing some damage to Steve. It's sloppy, but that's a really cool one. Those are some great moments in Saints history, and some stuff I'm able to put up on the wall. You kind of stole mine. 2011 sticks out. I know exactly where I was. Obviously, we talked about that last week. But also the jersey behind me, one of Delvin Breaux's greatest performances as a Saint, one of the most underrated, I think, Saints Falcons matchups, because the Saints were horrid that year. And the Falcons come to town undefeated. Thursday night football. And here's Delvin Breaux, an undrafted free agent, never played college ball, was pretty good up in Canada, multi-time all-star up there, and he's got prime Julio Jones and just absolutely shuts him down. Man, that's one of my favorite ones.
It is. I mean, people talk about Marshawn Lattimore owning Mike Evans. Delvin Breaux owned Julio Jones, really in 3 matchups between the players. But that matchup, I mean, Julio didn't get shut out, but the 1 or 2 catch receptions he had, really meant nothing for the outcome of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one that's, I think the only one that Julio had on Delvin in that one matchup I was talking about was like a 5-yard out. Doesn't mean a whole lot. With that being said, I want to transition into this, and it's a nice clean transition into this before Bob and I sign off. I talked to Delvin a little bit this week, and he has a upcoming book signing that we're obviously going to promote because he's a friend of the show. He's a friend of ours. Yeah. So if you have not yet got your copy of Unbroken, Delvin's autobiography, which goes into his football career, his childhood, some of the things we were talking at the beginning of the show with battles with depression. Yeah,
it's a great read.
It's an awesome read. Bob, I read this thing in a day. I couldn't put it down.
It took me 3. Oh, I'm slow. What can I say?
I was going to say, I could make a joke, but I don't think I'm going to. We'll save that for off the air. But yeah, so Delvin's going to be in New Orleans at the Campany Hilton Hotel on Saturday, the 17th. He's going to be there from 2 to 4. He's going to be selling copies of the book. He's going to be autographing copies of the book. And knowing Delvin Breaux, if you brought a jersey, he'd be happy to sign it for you. He is New Orleans blood through and through. I know he signed things for Bob. He sent me that jersey, and it was like a jersey swap. He wrote a whole note up on that. Great guy if you've never had a chance to meet him. If you're in town, if you're in town, go check him out. Canopy Hilton Hotel in New Orleans, 2 to 4 on Saturday. And Delvin's even giving you guys a great deal who show up. You bring a toy to donate for a child in need this Christmas, Delvin's going to give you $10 off the book. $10 off the book. It's almost half price for the book. So definitely go hang out with Delvin. And if anything, go give a toy to a child in need this Christmas. And John even beat me there with the comment. I think he's taking toy donations too. Yes, he is, John. John Butler's on top of it sometimes. See,
he is.
He's 4 steps ahead of both of us sometimes. What a guy. But definitely wanted to give Delvin a shout out. Go check it out if you're in the area this weekend before Saints and Falcons. And Bob, with all that said, we're going to have an awesome preview on
Mhm.
Sunday, sometime after the World Cup final, but before the Saints kick it off with the Falcons. Where could everybody follow you on the World Wide Web?
Folks, thanks for tuning in with us on a special Thursday night edition of the Bayou Blitz. Hopefully we brought some laughter, but also some good analysis to your evening. In the meantime, you can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose. I'm over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. You can follow all of our works through the Saints News Network, Saints News Network on Facebook, or at Saints News over on Twitter. Guys, thank you again for the promotions that you give our show, for your show. The Bayou Blitz is your show, and you keep making it a power name, a growing name, through all the NFL podcasts. We're starting to get noticed because of you. So keep it up, folks. We love you for it. And I can't begin to express my appreciation. But you guys have really taken on the Bayou Blitz as your own family member and promoted it as such. So thank you, and we love you for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Make sure you check me out on Instagram and Twitter at BT Boylan. You can follow the podcast at Bayou Blitz Pod on Twitter. You can follow all of our work with the Saints News Network at saints.media. Bob's got some great analysis. I know he gave so much today, but if you want to go back and read through some of his run offense versus run defense and pass offense, pass defense. You want the ins and outs of what's going to happen on Sunday. Go back and read Bob's articles there. John Hendricks has great work there. I got some fantasy stuff coming out this week. Kyle T. Mosley's been on top of it as well. Quick shout out to Drew Brees as well. He's the interim assistant coach for Purdue's bowl game. How about that? Who would have thought? From the broadcast booth to the coaching, to the sidelines, to who knows what's next. I know there's some Saints fans that are hoping he ends up back on the New Orleans Saints sideline.
Hey, you never know. I mean, I think that this is an audition for Drew, to find out if Drew likes it too. I don't expect that he'll be offered a position at Purdue because they have their own incoming coaches in. But if Drew likes the experience, then who knows where he could go. I think all of us agree that he is such a great offensive mind that if he wanted to coach, he would be a good one. So don't be surprised if this is not the last you hear about Coach Drew Brees.
I was going to say, there's a certain, now hear me out, there's a certain coach who's probably going to be traded this offseason that would need members of his coaching staff. And this particular guy and Drew have a pretty good relationship. Even if Drew were to come on as like offense or like passing game analyst, coordinate, whatever positions and made up positions they make for guys nowadays. They're not made up, but you get what I'm saying. Just you throw, what's the old saying? You throw three business sounding words together and you have a job title.
Right.
Sound three football words together, you have a coaching position. So nonetheless, that would be an interesting storyline. But shout out to Drew. Hopefully everything goes well for Purdue. But also, I mean, that's kind of like a weird spot for LSU fans too, right? Because you're probably rooting for Drew, but you also want to win the bowl game.
Yeah. Not me. I've been a fan of Drew Brees since Purdue. I've been a fan of Jim Everett since Purdue. Go Boilermakers.
Yeah, I don't have a horse in the race. I'm just here for a good game, right? But nonetheless, guys, thank you so much for all your support. Thank you guys for tuning in and making some adjustments to your schedule because we had adjustments to ours. That's so cool that you guys are just about everybody that's all our regulars are here, even on a Thursday night. So we appreciate you guys. We will be back on Sunday for more Falcons and Saints preview. We'll also be there on halftime. In the meantime, check us out on Saints News Network. Until then, find peace, spread love, practice positivity. We'll see you on Sunday.